11.
It's December 11th, Ukraine Media Center confirmed starts its operation. My name is Svetlana Chipurenko, and I'm happy to see everyone who joins us today. So we start our special project today, the marathon called We Are Different, We Are Equal, We Are United. And we will be talking about the way the national minorities and national communities of indigenous people of Ukraine fight Russian aggression, because we understand that Russia tries to eradicate not only Ukrainians but all other peoples who live in Ukraine, those who have become its part already. So let me introduce our speakers today. Joining us are Viktor Yelenskyi, the head of the State Service of Ukraine for Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Conscience. Also joining us a little bit later are Ashot Avanesyan. Also among their speakers online, joining us online will be Nina Plechak, head of the Greek Society, and Enotita Fedir Shandor, Hungarian fighter of the 68th Territorial Defense Battalion of the 101st Transcarpathian Territorial Defense Brigade. Also joining us online will be Eleonora Kulchar, Roman woman, director of the charity fund Blago, national coordinator of the Romani Early Years Network. Besik Shamugia, head of the Association of Georgians of Ukraine, Iberieli. Joseph Zisels, executive co-president of the Association of Jewish Organizations and Communities of Ukraine. Joining us in this studio are Elina Galayan, representative of the Union of Armenian of Ukraine, Eman Abu Al-Rub, president of the Ukrainian Center for Dialogue and Communications. Also joining us online are Yulian Kondor, the project coordinator of the Roma Women's Fund Chirikli, Vladimir Leslie, head of the Citizens Association Council of Germans of Ukraine, Olena Arabaji, member of the board of the Union of Karits of Ukraine, Said Ismailov, a serviceman of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Murat Nasirov, member of the board of the United Diaspora of Azerbaijanis of Ukraine, and also joining us are Serez Bolayen, Inyazor of Erza people, head of Erza Society in Ukraine. So let's proceed to our conversation. Mr. Viktor, first I would like to ask you, we know that the State Service of Ukraine for Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Conscience started collecting evidences of participation of the national minorities and indigenous people of Ukraine in the countering of Russian aggression, which will lay fundamentals for an almanac. So can you please tell us about this almanac and what those evidences tell you about? Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, dear spectators who are watching us online. This decision or this idea to collect the evidences has emerged right after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when after the first weeks it became clear that the enemy, who was hoping Ukraine to fall apart along the ethnic lines, has miscalculated everything. We were watching examples of sacrifice committed by the representatives of indigenous peoples of Ukraine, representatives of national minorities, and they were real intense examples, real intense instances of sacrifice when people of different nationalities were repelling the enemy. And even when we got interested about those specific people, which national minorities they represent, it turned out that even their call signs indicated the fact that they belong to indigenous peoples, national minorities, small ethnic communities. And it was, first of all, very touching, and secondly, it was very illustrative. I would like to mention that we are about to see this almanac. Right now we will be seeing how serious and extremely serious was the contribution of the national minorities in our fight against the enemy. And availing myself of opportunity, I would like to say that even during this big war, we don't stop, we don't cease our consultations with the national minorities, with indigenous peoples, regarding the way to defend their rights, to protect their rights, to develop their cultural and language identity. What needs to be done to make it happen? I think many of you know that just about a week ago the parliament adopted and the president on the very same day signed, which is again very demonstrative. So the president signed the amendments to the law on national minorities and a number of other laws that expand the rights of the national minorities in Ukraine and providing them with multilateral capabilities for development. We highly appreciate this fusion of opportunities, cultures, identities, languages that was created in in Ukraine under the arc of religion and dedication demonstrated by our national minorities and indigenous peoples to defense of their homeland. And every day, without exaggeration, we see all those examples multiplying. We see what the representatives of our indigenous peoples and national minorities do every day, and we have to emphasize it that they don't segregate them from Ukrainian political nation. Thank you. Thank you. National minorities and indigenous people really contribute to our victory. And first of all, I would like to talk to those who defend our homeland with the arms in their hands. So let's proceed to our first block about participation of the national minorities and indigenous peoples in armed formations. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Said Ismailov. Mr. Said, can you please tell us about your experience of fighting the Russian Federation? Good morning, good health to everybody, dear panelists. It was unexpected to have the floor right after Mr. Yelenskyi. But what can I say? I can say that different representatives of Muslim communities, Muslim peoples of Ukraine, from the very first day of the full-scale invasion, starting with the 24th of February 2022, they took up the arms to defend the homeland. We have a large number of Crimean Tatars, Azerbaijanis, representatives of other peoples serving with the armed forces of Ukraine, National Guard, Bodyguard Service of Ukraine, and other security and defense forces units. We have both males and females. I know at least 4 of them among the Muslims of Ukraine who became either part of the armed forces or volunteers, fulfilling their duties, defending our homeland, defending our Ukrainian people. We have to work a lot with the national minorities in Ukraine because Russia is our enemy and aggressor, and they try to use the national minorities against the interests of Ukraine, against unity. This is what they play on the geopolitical level, on religious level, on national level. Even before the beginning of the war back in 2014, before the beginning of temporary occupation of Crimea and Donbass, huge amounts of money were invested by Russia into religious organizations and national organizations. This is what I was observing. Different projects were funded which aimed at promoting Russian narratives and playing in the best interest of occupier and the enemy. And with the beginning of the war, Russia uses that network of their agents quite intensely. Well, it's the responsibility of the security service of Ukraine, which keeps reporting that even the religious officials were acting in favor of Russian armed forces, Russian special services, and the same problems we've seen on part of other representatives of national communities. So Russia was trying to use national and religious factor in the war against Ukraine, in capturing Ukraine. This is why I think that our country needs to keep track thoroughly of those agents. Let's call the things what they are. The agents who work in the interests of our enemy. The war switches to the long-lasting phase. We have to get prepared. We have to join. We have to continue defending our homeland. We have to demonstrate self-respect, unity, and the interests of Ukraine should be on top of all other interests, no matter what happens abroad in other countries, no matter what are the armed conflicts, the relations. Ukrainians should only be interested in Ukrainian agenda. We have our horrible war. This night, all the air defense forces, I serve with the air defense forces, all air defense forces were waking up in the night upon the air raid alert, and the Kyivites were witnessing the intense missile strike on the capital, and we only see those missiles passing by, and we try to shut down those horrible munitions which target Ukrainians. So we have our horrible war we should be concerned of. And me as a representative of Tatar people, you all know but our channel, and upon the conclusions of this meeting there will be other spectators. So I want to emphasize that Crimean Tatar people is different from Tatar people. Crimean Tatar people have the reputed representatives, Majlis, and talking about Tatar people, which is dispersed across the territories mostly of aggressor country. So the Tatar people are being discriminated, deprived of their language, their culture. They're being attempted to Russify. Tatars, Bashkirs, and representatives of other small peoples of Russia, Dagestanis, Buryatians, they are used as cannon fodder in the war against Ukraine. The Russians use the national minorities, throwing them to the midstorms. This is what happened last winter under Bakhmut. We've seen it as paramedics. We knew exactly from our soldiers who was going to storm the trenches. So the enemy uses the national minorities against Ukraine. I think we should develop our national policy to influence all the national minorities in Russia. We have to communicate the ideas of worthiness, of preservation of their language, culture, national identity to the imprisoned peoples of Russia. In view of this, I'm humbled by what is going on among the Tatars of Ukraine, specifically among the youth, the initiative to create the new national unity that will stand to defend the national interests of Ukraine and to communicate to the Tatars who live in Russia the ideas of national worthiness and national identity, because after the suppression of national conscience in Russia, the officials in Tatarstan, well, those who belong to Tatar ethnos, they are included into imperial ideas of Russia, so they need to have the healthy national forces translating the ideas of national rebirth, national self-identification for small peoples of Russian. And I'm humbled by the fact that Crimean Tatar youth is working in this area. I think this initiative should be supported by the state authorities, by Mr. Yelenskyi and the service headed by him. And as a military, as a sergeant of the armed forces of Ukraine, I can state that those national organizations of Tatars, which before the full-scale invasion were functioning in Ukraine, they were funded from Russia, and they were fulfilling Russian narratives and Russian and Russian agenda. So yes, we need government support to develop the healthy national communities that work in the best interest of Ukraine. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. If I may add just a couple of words, I would like to say to Mr. Sergeant Ismail that we were discussing this issue of support of the imprisoned peoples of Russia right before the beginning of our session. And I would also like to thank him because really today in the night when I'm waking up upon the shots of our air defense systems, I recalled Mr. Seyit Ismakilov, who was a mufti, the head of religious union of Muslims of Ukraine, who on the very first day of Russian full-scale invasion joined the armed forces of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Seyit. I join your statement because really this night those people were defending our skies. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Murat Nasirov, who started with humanitarian help and volunteer activity and then took up the arms to defend Ukraine as a part of the armed forces. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving the floor to me. I would like to start with the fact that no matter how difficult it is, there are nations in Ukraine, Chechens, Georgians, Azerbaijanis, Abkhazians, Dagestanis, Crimean Tatars, who with the beginning of the war started doing something to keep Ukraine together, to keep it as we know it, independent, so it's not given orders how to fulfill its external and internal policy. The European standard country, as we know it, I've passed a difficult way as a part of the armed forces of Ukraine because there were many questions to me even in the beginning of this war. You know, such help for us as Azerbaijanis, as Muslims, we were doing everything to make sure that the people, you know, the minority, the nation that requires help, we as a citizens, we were fighting not only as a citizens but citizens of other countries that were fighting without citizenship of Ukraine as volunteers. We were doing everything to make sure that the people see the support and they join. And this is what happened on the 24th of February. Everybody got united around one goal, around victory. And as my brother Said said, that the war is switching into protracted phase, so it's irrelevant to reserve now. We have to get even more united because it's going to be difficult. Moreover, there is a winter coming. We know that the enemy loves such weather. We've seen it the last year. They use all things possible. They use the mid-storms under Avdiivka, Bakhmut. They don't count our forces, but we cannot afford it. The personnel is morally prepared but still fatigued after the 2 years of war. The guys go and do their job. They don't refuse, but the nation, the people should stand united. Like my brother said, that we shouldn't be concerned with what's going on abroad, humanitarian problems, anything. Yes, there are problems, but we have to support our troops and enable it to go and take our land back. As a representative of Azerbaijani people, Azerbaijani youth, I can tell you that Azerbaijan, with their experience, they demonstrated what we can do. 30 years, our territories were under occupation. Within 24 hours, we've taken our land back. Is the indicator of the fact that Ukraine can do it as well, and we will take all necessary efforts to take ours back. Because life as Muslims, we trust in God. We know that our life is the most sacred. I know more than 40 Azerbaijanis who gave their lives for Ukraine, and I can tell you that we have respect to everybody who is defending Ukraine with the arms in their hands, to everybody who supports the armed forces. My brothers who work with the air defense forces, thank you, Said, for what you're doing, because without you there would be no peaceful life here in Kyiv. We do everything in the front lines to make sure that the children in Kyiv go to kindergartens in the morning, school children go to schools, and there should be no line, no segregation between the military and the civil. We have one goal, and we should stand united around one goal. And we, as armed forces, we will make sure that this trash doesn't appear in this land anymore, and so that our children don't see it. What Russia does is the aggression, death, all around the place. They don't even take away the body of their dead, and we will make sure that our children live in a European country with the freedom of speech, religious freedom. I was, for example, praying in the street, and people were watching it with respect. No one said anything ever about that. We have no religious conflict. It's pleasant for me, and I want to live in this country. I want to live here. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you for giving the floor to me. Thank you, Mr. Murat, for defending our land and taking back ours. Mr. Seres, we would like to talk to you about the contribution of the imprisoned peoples of Ukraine in the fight for our lands. Please share your experience about that. I would like to introduce myself because it's important. I represent the League of Free Nations here, the Free Nations of Ural and Erzya community of Ukraine, and representatives of all of our peoples fight in the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine. We have many dead, but I would like to say not about the contribution that was made, because it's just too small to talk about it. We've just recently buried an Erzya, Mikhail Vyshevalov, but I want to talk about what we have to do, because it's more important in my opinion, and I probably may say some unpleasant or unpopular things, and that may create a feeling of hostility with somebody. I'll talk as a realist, as an officer, as a military. The war has switched to the protracted phase. It's a war of resources. Talking about arms and money, we can rely upon our friends. And talking about human resource, we cannot rely on anybody except ourselves. It's not a war for the land. It's not an economic war. It's a war to destroy Ukraine. And in Moscow they say openly about it, there should be no Vyshevankas, no Ukraine, no Ukrainian language. And then there is a question arising, can we win this war of resources with force? No, we cannot. It's the existential war, war of values, war of principles, and we cannot win this war unless we change our attitude to it. So what is the Achilles heel of Moscow? Just like the Soviet Union was afraid of disintegration through national republics, in the same way Russia is afraid now. And when they say help us, and Ukrainians say why shouldn't we help them, so I have to say that Ukraine shouldn't look at it as help. It's just another way to disintegrate the enemy. is the slingshot of David that is not used today. So if we gather the representatives of all of the imprisoned people of Russia, what do we get? A battalion, a company? How will it reinforce the armed forces? But we have other potential. We know those people. We can work with them. There are representatives of all of those peoples of Ukraine, and we do it with our weak forces as volunteers, on volunteer basis. And unfortunately, Ukrainian government so far doesn't appreciate it. Russian authorities understand it. They block the channels of Erza on Telegram. The channels of all of the good Russians continue operating. Our activists are being arrested in Russia. Patrushev announces the enemies of Russian Federation, the League of Free Nations, the Forum of Free Peoples of Ukraine. We monitor the situation, and what we do, the news, some content that we share, we see how people react to it. Not everything is lost. We have to open an ideological war, start the counter-propaganda. We don't do it so far. Those projects that exist, I apologize, but they have no result. It's unclear what they aimed at, and they can only influence the conscience of the editor-in-chief and no one else. Do I have more time? So what I'm trying to say? I'm trying to say that we have to do what Voice of America, Radio Liberty was doing. We have to do small projects that work with small peoples, with ethnic Ukrainians, like 10 to 15 millions of them reside in Moscovia. This year, 39 billion of rubles is almost $400 million that were allocated from the budget for propaganda. A dialogue agency received $9 million to create fakes. All of internet is clogged with those fakes. We don't do anything on our part, but you know, it's something that we can do too, but we do not. Some might say it irritates the West because they don't want Russia to disintegrate. Yes, they're irritated because they don't know what's gonna happen next, but Ukraine should continue working. Ukraine should offer the scenarios. Like you see, the League of Free Nations, they don't claim the nuclear arms. They want to build their national states. They take the part of their responsibility. We have to win this war. We have to win it because it's the only way today. If some might say that we don't want to irritate somebody in the West, yeah, but not at cost of our lives, not at cost of our state. Yes, there is some work, the civil society works, there is a temporary committee of the Verkhovna Rada on those matters, but they cannot work for a year meanwhile the war is going on, and we are ready to work. We already do so. It's not a help to us, it's an opportunity to eradicate the enemy, to destroy them. Thank you very much for your opinion. Thank you. So let's proceed to the second part of our marathon, and we'll talk to those who openly express their thoughts, the leaders of our opinion. I would like to ask our technical team to give the floor to Mr. Fedir Shandor. He will tell us about his everyday activities as the representative of the Hungarian people. So, Mr. Fedir, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Am I being heard? Yes, we're hearing you. Yeah, we can both see and hear you. Everything seems to be all right. Mr. Fedir, are you with us? Can you hear me now? Yes, we do hear and see you. Give me a small second. I need to switch off all the necessary applications. Am I heard now? Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, well, good morning. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. As we say, the New Year and Christmas are coming. Thank you for giving the floor to me. Just a small statistics. In the armed forces of Ukraine, there are currently 394 Hungarians serving there as a part of 12 brigades. Unfortunately, 32 of them have died. And we have maybe ambiguous historic statistics that among the Transcarpathian servicemen who were in the ranks of the armed forces since 2014, the first one who perished was a Hungarian bodyguard serviceman, and in 2022, the first one among Transcarpathians was a Hungarian too. Well, I'm a deputy dean of Cathedra of Sociology in Transcarpathian Uzhhorod University. The representation was by me, Professor Shandor, and Doroshki Viktor. We took up the arms on the very first day to go to the front, and we represent the Hungarian community who, just like all other citizens of Ukraine, fight for European values, for those freedoms, for those liberties that we aspire to in European civilization and global civilization. The Hungarian community knows very well what happened in 1956. We know exactly what's Russian brothers' hand, which drowned Hungarian revolution in blood, just like in 1948 when the insurrection of Krzysztof Petőfi was drowned in blood. And just like in the same way in 56, the blood was spilled in the streets of Hungary thanks to the so-called brotherly hand of Russia. And regardless of all the media moments that are used, different manipulative technologies that our neighbor wields very well since the times of Goebbels, they've copied their lessons very well from their Nazi friends, and here we're fighting against this propaganda on a high level in Ukraine, but we still have to remember that there are problems in different areas, so please judge not by process but the result. The result of voting in the European Union, the results of voting in the United Nations Organization and other international institutions. The Hungarians, just like other peoples, take part in the war against the enemy behind the northern wall. They know very well what is it like to have a neighbor like this, a neighbor like Russia, and they also stand for the values. The values are only revealed in the results. Today we've got from the Hungarian people, not from Ukrainian diaspora, but the Hungarian people of Hungary, from civil organizations, from the heads of the communities, heads of the cities, mayors of the cities, starting from the February 2022. Within the first 4 days we got hundreds of backpack, tents, warm clothing from Zahon, Fenyshliski, Debrecen, Szeged, Nyíregyház, Budapest community of different districts of Budapest. They were providing support and they continue doing so. More than 104 million hryvnias were spent to procure drones, starting with Mavic 3T and thermal vision devices. Right now we're handing over to our Hungarians who are a part of the Marines in the Kherson area, in the left bank. We got specialized life-saving vests from Hungary, and just yesterday we've handed over a lot of shipments from Budapest, not only warm clothing, fleece and socks, but also new contraptions of military area, the new of military industrial sector, specialized material, optics sights, drones, night vision devices, both individual and group, the professional scale from Hungary. So as a socialist, as a professor, I judge by result, and this result is on the side of Hungarian people who don't forget about theirs, about the year 1956. They don't forget their military glory, and now this military glory is being reborn by us as a part of the armed forces of Ukraine in the east of Ukraine, in our fight for European civilization, for those values that were fought for by our grandfathers in 1956, in 1848. Hungarians have never forgotten it. They know what's justice, what is motherland. So glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Thank you, Mr. Fedir, for defending Ukrainian land and joining our conversation. Joining us in our studio is Mr. Ashot Avanesyan. Mr. Ashot, please join our conversation and tell us about the umbrella organization that you're heading that includes a number of national minorities. So please tell us about their activity, the results and achievements. Good morning, dear friends. Good morning, everybody who's joining us online. First of all, I would like to say thank you for invitation to this event. Thank you to all of the specialists of the State Service on Ethnic Policy. We do a lot together today, a lot with the representatives of different ethnic communities. We all take part against the Russian aggression. I would like to say that it's, so to say, we have a lot of different projects, but today when we defend our homeland, our country in the trenches, you know, there are no nationalities in the trenches. We're all together there. We all fight for our country, for Ukraine. And today we have a lot of perished heroes among the national communities. There are many defenders today who defend our borders in the front lines. But talking generally that we've done everything we could, no, I cannot say so. There's a lot of work ahead of us. We have to continue working to make sure our victory is coming, so we become the members of European communities, so that Russian aggressor finally understands that we defend our homes, our borders. It's our country, our Ukraine. And I want to say even more, dear friends, my colleagues, they know. A lot of them take part in different activities today. That's starting from the year 2014. We were working and we continue working. We have a humanitarian headquarters deployed with the Council of Ethnic Minorities. Battle Angels work in the front lines represented by us. It's our front, and we must help our defenders. We must do it. So everybody works in their workplace, volunteers in their place, their the defenders in their workplace. And if every civil organization does what the Council of National Communities of Ukraine does. I think that the victory will be coming even sooner, the victory that we all await for. And once again, I would like to tell the representatives of all of the national minorities, thank you. Thank you for your activity, for your unity, for the sake of our victory and our Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ashot. I would like to ask our technical team to get Ms. Nina Plechak connected to us. Ms. Nina, please tell us about your organization and what the Greek national community does in Ukraine to deoccupy the lands of the Greeks. Well, can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you see my presentation? Yeah, we're seeing and hearing you. We're seeing your presentation. Thank you. I'll put it full screen. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to take part in this marathon. We are different, we are equal, we are united. Today, Ukraine and the Greeks of Ukraine experience hard times. The armed aggression against Ukraine started in 2014 with a full-scale escalation starting with the 24th of February, and they threaten our unique culture, our unique languages. Out of 48 Greek villages, 44 are occupied by Russians. They account for 85% of the territories where the Greeks reside. More than 600 days, the Greeks of Ukraine, along with the Ukrainians, defend the territorial integrity of our country. And we see that currently the war confirms that the public diplomacy is a very important element of our fight, because we have to counter Russian narratives to create the image of Ukraine for the global community as polycultural and polyethnic country fighting for civilization, democracy, and European values. In 2023, the community of Greeks of Ukraine, the Federation of the Greek peoples of Ukraine, arranged communication with the consulates and embassies in such countries as India, United States, and Greece. Thanks to the fruitful communication of diplomatic offices of Ukraine abroad, and thanks to the Foundation of Bumbaras and Svetlana Dolgopola, such projects were implemented as the documentary about us, Vasileva Roma, the Greeks of Azov region. That's the first documentary made in Roma language. It was made in the summer 2023 upon the initiative of our Greek community in Enotita with the support of Spilne broadcaster and another project is the photo exhibition dedicated to the city of the St. Mary, Mariupol. We've gathered the works of such artists as Serhiy Makarov, Angela Biladit, Liv Sandalov, Angela Sigak, Alina Komarova, Viktor Dedov, unfortunately passed Alexander Berezhny, Lyudmila Buyanova, Maxim Sagaidak, who unfortunately perished defending Mariupol. This photo exhibition is the evidence of Russian crimes against prisoners of war and Greek people in Ukraine. We've implemented these projects in New Delhi, India, Chicago, New York, and on the 6th and 9th of December there was a demonstration of documentary in Manhattan, in New York, which was attended by a lot of people. We had an opportunity to tell about Ukraine, the Greeks of Ukraine, the situation that is unfolding now, And right this Sunday, there will be a demonstration of a documentary as Eleonora, the story of Greeks of Azov region in Thessaloniki, with the support of Ukrainian consulate in Thessaloniki. Right on the screen you can see the pictures from those events, so you can see the way it happened, just a selection of photos, the pictures of Mariupol before and after the beginning of full-scale invasion. This is a picture from the presentation of the documentary in New York. In November 2022, the professor and the member of the Greek community of Ukraine, Mr. Tana Lubchenko, held a number of lectures called The Influence of the War on the Greeks of Azov region of Ukraine for the students of the most reputed universities of the United States. And I would like also to state that one of the consequences of the full-scale invasion of Russia, full-scale of Ukraine by Russia, may result in critical eradication of Greeks of Azov region, their culture with their unique culture and languages. So this is why right now we're developing the plan of actions to reinforce the rights of ethnic communities that were mostly affected by the battle operations of Russian Federation, such as Greeks of Ukraine, in compliance with the international law, and those practices are being implemented thanks to the fruitful cooperation of the State Service for Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Speech and Commissioner for Human Rights. Thank you for your attention. Together to the victory. Thank you, Ms. Nina. Thank you for this interesting presentation. And we're proceeding to the next block of our marathon. We're talking about the humanitarian help. And I would like our technical team to get Ms. Eleonora Kulchar connected. Are you with us, Ms. Eleonora? Yes. Good morning, everybody. Ms. Eleonora, can you please tell us about your activities, the activities of Rome Shelter that works in Uzhhorod and other charity areas that your community works with during the full-scale invasion? Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for giving the floor to me. I'm humbled by the fact that the Romes can take part in such events too. And with the beginning of the war, we've opened on the 1st of September 2022, we've opened the first shelter in Ukraine to provide free housing and 3 meals. So we've used the complex solution of the problem, and we've accepted more than 2,500 people from different parts of Ukraine, from Zaporizhia region, Mariupol, Kharkiv region, Donetsk region, and other places in Ukraine where the war rages, where the enemy is in offensive, unfortunately. And we were able to provide free shelter to 90%, well, 90% of the attendants were Roms, and we were open not only for our people, not only for Roms. We had Azerbaijanis from Kharkiv, Greeks from Berdyansk who stay there until this very moment, Georgians from Odessa and Donetsk regions, Ukrainians obviously who live there until this very day. On these pictures you can see our shelter. This is the general hall where the internally displaced persons live. So again, we approach it in a complex manner. We have classes for children. You can see there are teachers having classes. A girl is an Azerbaijani. She is a very orthodox. She's a believer. Her whole family is like that. We have art therapy, psychological help for the children and for the adults, legal support support in reissue of the documents, because many people have unfortunately come without any paperwork because they were living just with what they had on themselves. Today, well, you remember how it was the last year. Today it's a little bit different, and we continue helping not only those who live in a shelter but also to other internally displaced persons, people from other parts of Transcarpathian region. They come for help to us, and we provide humanitarian aid. And from the very first days of war, we started helping the military. We forwarded the help to them. You see us here on those pictures weaving the camouflage nets. We've handed over a lot of generators, many stuffs for the military, meals, warm clothes, everything that we can help with. Until this very day, we share it with the military with great joy, and I trust that all together in a union, just like we did from the very first days of the war, this is how we win. Many Roms are in the ranks of the army, and there are many families, even in Uzhhorod there are Rom families that lost their fathers, their husbands in the war. Also, we're involved in education area, education for Rome kids, and in other areas we are in cooperation with the local governments, regional government, and we're also in cooperation with the State Service on Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Conscience. So in brief, this is how we work. Thank you, Miss Eleonora. I would like to ask our technical team to give the floor to Mr. Besik Shamugia. Good morning. Can you please tell us about the humanitarian support provided by the Georgian ethnic community in Ukraine? Good afternoon, or sorry, good morning. Once again, can you see the presentation on the screen? Yes, thank you. Good morning, dear colleagues. Good morning, dear head of the service. Thank you for the invitation. We would like to meet in normal conditions just like earlier, but we understand it's not going to happen like earlier because it will be even better, and we can't wait to see that moment. Many of our compatriots, they experienced war many times. They were running from Abkhazia in the beginning of their 90s, and then there was a war in the year 2008. A lot of Georgians were living in Donetsk and Luhansk region. Many of them fled from Abkhazia, and both in 2014 and now they are forced to run from Russian occupiers. Within the first couple of days of the full-scale war, our diaspora started being even more active. We deployed a crisis center that was recreated after the COVID pandemics to make sure that the volunteers can pick those categories of help that are of top priority, like help to the internally displaced people, the support in the cyberspace, and the distribution of humanitarian aid in coordination with the Embassy of Georgia. We were evacuating women and children, working actively with the Georgian volunteers who were accepting refugees from Ukraine. From the very first days, the members of our organizations became a part of territorial defense forces, and many of our compatriots are in the front lines now. Apart from the organization of volunteer help, we work in in 11 regional centers. The heads of our regional communities launched the centers to collect the information and process it and to forward it to the central office in Kyiv. We have 45 people working in coordination headquarters and more than 350 volunteers working with the regional coordination centers. We were fulfilling coordination works in Ukraine. We were providing financial support to Ukrainian armed forces through our humanitarian aid headquarters. We supported the internally displaced individuals, we have online volunteers, and also helping with delivering clothes, ammunition, and meals. The first humanitarian cargo started coming from the very first days of war from Georgia. It was important to provide verified information to make sure everything goes smoothly. We've solved all the problems that were arising with logistics during the first days of war. On top of that, it was very important to provide a quality help, as the surveys showed that after the big crisis, the amount of humanitarian aid from 50 to 70% results to be unnecessary due to the lack of coordination between different levels of authority, different civil organizations and other organizations who are involved in distribution of humanitarian aid. It's very important to inform on the actual needs as the organizations, what is their priority, what are their needs first of all, and obviously the analysis of information that we were doing in coordination with the local organizations. On those pictures you can see our volunteers from different parts of Ukraine, who work in different regional capitals. Here you can see humanitarian aid and in year 2022 the Georgian post sent 800 tons of humanitarian cargo and became a leader among 191 countries, and where we were taking part in organization of delivery of this humanitarian aid from the very first days of war. Upon our initiative, there was a headquarters organized in Georgia. We sent more than 200 generators to the regions which were mostly affected by the war. We organized the concerts of famous Georgian artists in Ukraine to support the Ukrainian army, and since the year 2022 we take active part in organization of trips to Georgia for the children from the regions affected by the wars, specifically for those whose parents died. And until this very moment, more than 300 children underwent rehabilitation. This flag of Ukraine is incredibly precious for us because it's signed by the Ukrainian warriors. Of course, we will continue delivering the humanitarian cargo to all regions of Ukraine. We mobilize financial support for Ukrainian army, and I want to say that together we can do even more to make sure that the victory is coming sooner. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Thank you for this presentation. Now we will find out about the help provided by the Jewish society, Jewish community of Ukraine. Let's get Mr. Joseph Zisels connected. Good afternoon, good afternoon. Can you please tell us about the psychological rehabilitation centers that you've opened in Carpathians? Well, first of all, let me thank all of my colleagues who were telling about the specific aid that the national organizations, national communities were providing to Ukraine. Is very important, specifically during times of war, to demonstrate that the national communities, they put aside their claims to the state and they're all united to support Ukraine. Talking about the Jewish community, the help of the Jewish community is extensive. We have an extensive community, and our local communities, they take all reasonable efforts to provide humanitarian aid, to provide military support. I can tell you about our organization, which unites more than 300 Jewish organizations in more than 90 cities of Ukraine. We started getting involved in provision of humanitarian aid way before the full-scale invasion back in 2014 when the war has started. We, together with our brothers, invited the Israeli psychologists to train Ukrainian psychologists in countering PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. There were a lot of workshops starting from 2014. There were no specialists in Ukraine who have extensive experience in overcoming PTSD. As the full-scale aggression unfolded, since we have certain infrastructure in many cities of Ukraine and our representatives work on the level of local communities, we created more than 10 projects right away. We've suspended almost all of our projects that existed before the war, and we've switched fully to humanitarian projects related to support of the victims of the war. We were first of all dealing with evacuation from the east of Ukraine, of the women and children, of the elderly. We were among the first ones in Ukraine who started transporting the people with difficult health conditions with a specialized transport, and thus we've evacuated hundreds of such families from Ukraine. There were 2 distribution points in Kyiv and Dnipro where you could spend a night, and then with the help of our volunteers continued proceed further on to Ukraine. Our volunteers were working in local communities there. They were providing help to the visitors. They were deploying humanitarian centers even before the state or municipal authorities started working with other types of aid. However, I think that the amount of such aid is still insufficient. The civil society, just like our organizations from the very first days, were helping those who were affected by war. We were collecting funds, we were raising funds, we were procuring the medikits, tourniquets, everything that was necessary, and we were sending it all to the military units. And even me, regardless of my age, I signed up with the armed forces, and we continue working. I signed up with the Territorial Defense Forces, who were supplying meals to the Territorial Defense Forces, because in the very first days of the war it was very difficult. The money was not enough. Everything was a little bit chaotic during those first days of war. We were helping the wounded ones. You remember, during the first month of the full-scale invasion, the funding of the armed forces was pretty weak, and even the salaries were paid irregularly. When a warrior was ending up in a hospital, they were left without money, so we arranged the channel of support for the wounded so they can buy something for them. there were other types of help to other groups, but I would like about what we were doing during evacuation of the families from east to west. We've seen that the families end up in difficult conditions in the west of Ukraine. It was difficult to find housing there, to get employed, to find financial support, financial aid, what to do with the kids. We had to understand the cultural barriers, because there are, there are cultural differences between east and west, and the families that were ending up there, they were ending up in conditions that created psychological trauma, and we've paid attention to this in the September previous year, and we started coming up with the ideas of creation of psychological support projects for those internally displaced persons. We've consulted with psychological institutions. Among our partners, there are 3 leading psychological institutions: International Institute of Kyiv Mohyla Academy and Ukrainian Catholic University. The psychology department. And as we realized the scale of the problems from the 1st of May last year, we started coming up with such projects. And now I'm in the Carpathians, where we've opened yet another project, a 77th project from the beginning of the war. Our program is called Renewal after the war, and it's made up of a number of projects. We come to different locations, safe, beautiful locations in Carpathians. We have people affected by the war coming there from all over Ukraine. You can understand that there are hundreds of thousands of them. We cannot help all of them, but we've developed a screening testing program that allows us creating groups by different levels of trauma, and we find support for different types of those people corresponding to their stress ratio. And this is how we work. Every project includes from 20 to 70 people affected, and then from 4 to 12 psychologists in our system. There are art therapists, more than 12 psychologists working, 13 psychiatrists. We have more than 40 volunteers working there. Also, we've trained a lot of administrators. We do a lot of activities related to improvement of professional level. We've created the Methodist school, because every project should be accompanied by a Methodist. Mr. Joseph, if I may ask you to summarize. Yes, I'm about to wrap up. So we work uninterruptedly. We only had a break for 2 weeks for New Year and Easter, and we work in many places at the same time, because only in this way we can help everybody who was affected by the war, or at least many people who were affected by the war. We also work with the military after the injuries, with the prisoners of war who got liberated. We work with the women who were affected by the violence in temporarily occupied territories. We work with the families whose family members are taken prisoners of war, for those missing in action, and it's all done by more than 200 psychologists who work with our program. But there is still a lot of work to be done. We raise funds from all over the world. The government doesn't help us at all, so we raise funds from all over the world. Our organization is known throughout the world. So within the 15 months of war, we've spent for this program alone more than $2 million, and it's still insufficient. All our program is run by volunteers who don't make anything out of their job. We will have a small break for holidays, and then we will continue doing our projects. And I have to mention that we were trying to help other national communities, and we were able to only help three of them. The Greek community, representative of which was having floor before me. We were able to help the Assyrian and Crimean Tatar communities. Thank you for your attention. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Let me get back to our panelists. Miss Elena, can you please tell us about the experience of the Armenian national community and their help for Ukrainian people? Dear friends, good afternoon. Thank you for your invitation. It's my pleasure to be a part of this panel. I want to thank all of our colleagues. It's important to have a platform where we can exchange experience, exchange the problems that the national communities are facing in Ukraine. I represent the Armenian community, and I want to once again thank the organizers for this opportunity to present the activities of our headquarters within the last year. The presentation, can we put it on the screen? Can the technical team please put the presentation on the screen? So this is how you open it. Well, you were given the presentation to the technical team. Yes, please put it on the screen. Thank you very much. So within the year 2023, the headquarters of the community of Armenians of Ukraine continues to exercise the humanitarian activity. And from the very first days, we were providing humanitarian aid to both civil population and the armed forces of Ukraine. Within the framework of the support program, the headquarters extended more than 4,000 tons of humanitarian aid, the supply of meals, utilities, medicines, hygienic products, and other basic needs arising with the people affected by the war. So it's the integral part of the efforts of the headquarters team aimed at covering the basic needs of those affected by the war. On top of humanitarian initiatives, it's important to mention that the headquarters supports the armed forces of Ukraine, directly reinforcing the capabilities of defense capabilities of the armed forces of Ukraine. We've handed over 120 pickups to the military, to different units, for fulfillment of their duties in the front lines. Also, I can report that recently we started implementing the winter program to support the military initiated by the headquarters, and within the framework of that program we are about to hand over 100 generators to the front lines. The decision was approved after the meeting of the headquarters that was taking place in Yerevan this summer, and the first shipments were already shipped to the front lines, to the hottest spots there, and the management of the headquarters is directly in touch with the defenders of Armenian origin in the ranks of the armed forces, which is necessary to promptly react to their needs and the needs of their brothers and sisters in arms. It's important to mention that the operation of the headquarters of the community of Armenians of Ukraine covers all of the territory of Ukraine. We are in touch with the local Armenian communities of Ukraine. We expand the area of our activities to implement the humanitarian tasks of the headquarters. Let me give you a couple of examples of the activities of the regional communities. For example, the headquarters of the community of Armenians in Kropivnitsky supports the internally displaced people from the regions mostly affected by the war. The headquarters of the community of Armenians of Dnipro deployed its activity within the very first days of the full-scale invasion, and we continue providing active support to the internally displaced persons, medical institutions, the residents of different cities, specifically the hotspots such as Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Berdyansk, Severodonetsk, and we also work to support the armed forces of Ukraine. Of course, the headquarters of the community of Armenians in Zaporizhia turned into a large-scale humanitarian hub that supports more than 500 persons on a daily basis with humanitarian aid. You see the Armenian Cultural Center and Armenian Church in those pictures. The headquarters of Armenian community in Transcarpathian region was dealing with evacuation of civil population as well as import of humanitarian aid from abroad, specifically from France. On this picture you can see the moment of evacuation of internally displaced persons to the Zakarpattia region. The headquarters of the community of Armenians of Ukraine in Kyiv also supports both civilians and the military, and today almost in every city of Ukraine in the headquarters of the community of Armenians of Ukraine we create the regional centers to supply the humanitarian aid, which is important because the centers are initiated and supported by the Armenian community of every single city, specifically in Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Lutsk, Lviv, Uzhhorod, Zhytomyr, and the rest of them. Even now, the headquarters of the community of Armenians of Ukraine does not limit its activity with only humanitarian and military initiatives. In the year 2023, we pay special attention to the development of talented youth in the area of sports, and we also allow the talented Armenians to develop their potential in the global arena, which is incredibly important during the war. It's important to support our people. So to summarize it, I can say that the headquarters of communities of Armenians of Ukraine is in the middle of humanitarian and social initiatives, and such activity is a bright example of unity and solidarity even in such difficult conditions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Ms. Elena, and we proceed to the last block of our marathon. We will talk about the international communications. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Emot. Mr. Emot, tell us please, what does your organization do to inform the world about what's going on? I would like to ask our technical team to put the presentation on the screen, and we would like to ask you about how you work with the global broadcasters to communicate information in Arabic language. Good afternoon everybody. I would like to thank our Arabian diaspora, Muslim diaspora. We would like to thank the community represented by Mr. Ashot, who were always representing me. I have to say that we are equal, we are different, but we are strong. With the beginning of the war, we were feeling it that there will be a war, and we were working on different levels inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine. In the beginning, there was a lot of different work with the media because Russian propaganda was very intense. We, as Arabs, well, you know, there are more than 400 million Arabs in the world, those who speak Arabic language. So it's the first role. Then we've started communication along the religious line, religious dialogue, establishing different meetings, both offline and online. First, in January 2022, there was the first interview for Al Jazeera, and that was open for
all of the international community. Al Arabiya, Sky News Al Arabiya, Dubai Al Hiwar America, BBC, Fox News, and many other channels. First, we were doing three wonderful jobs. First, 3rd of February in Ukraine Forum in 2022, we gathered all of the Muslim Arabic diaspora. There were more than 45 organizations represented. It was the first time that all those organizations gathered in Ukraine. Some of them came to Ukraine Forum, some of them were joining online, and all together we proclaimed that we stand together with the Ukrainian people, with our people, and we defend our people. And we've submitted 4 letters to the head of United Nations, head of EU, head of Muslim League, and head of Arabic League to stop this. And then in the summer 2022, we've made another online event, and I would like to thank Mr. Igor Lisovsky, who was staying with us online and offline, Mr. Igor Kovreev, Mr. Vyacheslav Voroshenko, and for the young Ukrainians, we've made a round table before the year. It was the 18th of February, and on the 21st of February, we've created the Arab Volunteers Fund, and on the 24th of February, we have our youth team and we've submitted a letter from behalf of the youth to stop the war. And on the 23rd, we've created the Arab Volunteer Society. And before that, we were here in Ukraine Forum. Mr. Ashot was having floor along with the Minister of Culture and Information Policy. People were concerned, but we've come here all together saying that we are all together, we stand together for the sake of defense of our people, to defend Ukraine. And first, we were working with all of the regions of Ukraine. In all of the railway stations, I was making footages from all those places to spread the word, to help the Ukrainian refugees. And when I asked what help is necessary, I asked the Red Crescent and Muslim organizations in Europe, in the borders, to support Ukrainians crossing the borders. And since then, we've helped more than 1,000 Ukrainian families. We've supplied the meals on behalf of our organization and our partners. By Mr. Vadim Drobat, we've presented 3 cars to the armed forces within the first days of war, first month of war, because the first month was the most difficult. We work with the Red Cross of Ukraine. They play a great role here. We are in cooperation with them, and we were helping the families of internally displaced persons together with the Red Cross of Ukraine. We had Arab doctors coming to Ukraine who were working with the government-controlled and other medical facilities, medical institutions of Ukraine in all regions of Ukraine. In Irpin, there is a doctor from Palestine. There was a huge project to implement it to treat our military and their families by the Muslim and Arab doctors. We have volunteers in the front lines. We have surgeons who used to help and continue helping us here. And working with the TV channels was the most difficult job, because it's not easy to get somebody invited to a TV channel on such a level as BBC, Al Jazeera, Sky News Arabia, Al Hiwar, and other channels. So those channels from the very first days of war, they were feeling that we communicate that faithful information, that we tell about the things as they are. This is why they got curious and they kept inviting us, and we were communicating that we have to continue defending our state just like the military do. And we had more than 750 channels, different broadcast channels where we communicated our messages through. And other Arabs were ensuring communication on different levels: the office of the president, the parliament, the cabinet of ministers, everybody who speaks Arabic language. They were having floor in different Arabic channels and broadcasters to spread the word about Ukraine. Also Iftar, but Iftar we have 150 people invited, but this event was smaller because it was a little bit difficult during the war, and we've submitted the official letter to the foundation of King Salman of Saudi Arabia, the Princes of Qatar, Kuwait and Emirates, and now Saudi Arabia extended more than $400 million. Emirates provided more than one, as well as Qatar, in the amount of more than $100 million. Kuwait extended more than $30 million, and they continue helping. The great role was played by the international conference. Mr. Viktor Yelenskyi, his first visit to Qatar in May 2022, was meeting the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Qatar and the head of Red Cross in Qatar. We've explained to them what's going on, what the Ukrainians do, and they asked what are the basic necessities that we need in Ukraine, what our soldiers need. You remember the first days it was were the most difficult for the military, and we, thanks God, continue helping us. International conferences that are going on. We have different international conferences in Poland, Qatar, Jordania, United Kingdom, United States, both online and offline. So we establish all those conferences to continue communicating the right things about Ukraine. I pray for Ukraine. I pray for the peace, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank the State Service for Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Conscience, who supports us, who advises us, and who is with all of our people all the time. Thank you very much. Let's get back to our online speakers. I would like to ask to have Yulian Kondor connected to us. Mr. Yulian, good afternoon. Can you please tell us about the activities of Rome community in terms of cooperation with international organizations to support Ukraine? Thank you very much for the invitation, for the opportunity to emphasize important things, emphasize successful stories that we are able to implement given the conditions we live in today. First of all, what I need to say is the area of humanitarian aid was directly related to international cooperation and our cooperation with the Romes in other countries. So there is a strong network of Rome organizations called Ergo. They are based in Brussels, and in cooperation with them, what we were able to do, we started looking for resources. We started raising funds to react to the most jeopardizing challenges of the first days of war. We were able to raise about 30 million euro that were used to procure meals, to ensure evacuation of IDPs, to create shelters, to build new shelters, and to talking about the work with international organizations. our first statement, the first statement of our organization, was made on the 4th of March in the United Nations Council on Human Rights, where we were urging the United Nations to create the Committee on Humanitarian Issues, the one that documents the situation with the human rights and humanitarian issues, humanitarian situation. And from the very beginning we were understanding that we need to cover this situation with the Roms, because Russian propaganda very intensely discredits Ukraine through Roman problem, and they continue doing it, maybe not to such an extent, and probably they cannot make it because there is unity among us, there is objective information. So basically our cooperation with the international organizations was built upon some large events such as Forum of Minorities or Forum of the United Nations for Minorities' Rights in Geneva, different events related to international cooperation in Europe, the Council of Europe, and on platforms like that we were able to present the information that we collect inside Ukraine, working with people, communicating with people. We've had a lot of analytical work done talking about the situation with the IDP Roms. Among that information that we communicate and something that the information that is used by Ukrainian authorities, more than 100,000 people were forced to leave their homes, more than 50,000 have to live abroad, I mean the Roms specifically, who had to leave Ukraine. And talking about this work in international level, there is a track, the existing track, one of the priority tracks is the reinforcement of our institutions in Ukraine. I think that it's important to mention that the political nation, this term is important now because our unique civil society, I think that since the creation of independent Ukraine, since recreation of our independence, we are really very strong, and it creates a balance that enables us to work and to as democratic institutions. This is why I want to emphasize that there was intense cooperation with our national partners, the State Service for Ethnic Policy and the Office of Commissioner for Human Rights, specifically in simplifying the procedures for acquisition of documents for the Roms who are internally displaced. It was a pilot project in Mukachevo in Transcarpathian region. And generally I can say that the unity with the Roms in Ukraine, with Ukraine generally, it's there. We observe it in a lot of countries. But unfortunately, in Russian Federation, we don't have any coordination with the Roms there. We just see that a part of opinion leaders, public leaders in Russian Federation, they support Putin's regime, they support the invasion and everything that was caused by it. And when we talk about the ways our counter narratives can work there, we have to take into account such examples as well. And to sum it up, I would like to say that I'm convinced that the circumstances around which the foundation is being built for our European future, they give a certain confidence that we may have positive decisions taken shortly, and the situation in Ukraine requires unprecedented solutions. We understand that things are complicated, but we will do everything on our part as an organization. We try to stimulate other Rome organizations to become part of those processes, to continue supporting, first of all, the people, to continue supporting our European future as well. Thank you, Mr. Yulian. I would like to ask our technical team to put Volodymyr Leslie on the screen. Mr. Volodymyr, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm heard. Yeah, we can both hear and see you. Mr. Volodymyr, can you please tell us about the activities of German national community in Ukraine, and how do you communicate information to Germany and other German-speaking countries about what's going on in Ukraine? Well, first of all, I would like to thank all of the defenders of Ukraine who were having floor today, those who defend Ukraine in the battlefield. According to our calculations, dozens of Germans, both male and female, are in the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine, which is important for us too. I would like to say that the Germans, just like representatives of any other peoples, we feel ourselves Ukrainians of different origin, obviously, but we're all Ukrainians. We support Ukraine, we fight for Ukraine all together. I would like to focus on a number of unique things that, in my opinion, are important for the international level. Back in 2022, we've made a small but important documentary, The Longest Day, 9 stories of Ukrainian Germans who were fighting for Ukraine, and we've demonstrated it on Suspilne, but at the same time we were showing it in other platforms of European Union translated, and this documentary was opening a film festival in Romania this year. So we were telling the stories of Germans helping within the first days of war, the Ukrainian Germans, what they were doing, because according to our calculations, 75–80% of the Germans remain in Ukraine. They support this country and they see their future here. But we asked ourselves frankly, what can we do on top of humanitarian aid and other opportunities? How can we help our country? And we've realized that on the way to the European Union, our country is supposed to fulfill the reforms, and one of those reforms was related to the protection of national minorities. And this is where we decided to focus our efforts and to help not only with advice and consultation, but also to communicate the position of Ukraine to politicians of European Union. We've established a number of conferences in Berlin. We've organized in coordination with MTES an intense conference in Berlin. We've engaged German politicians, and I have to say honestly that unfortunately we don't use all of our resources in full in those platforms of European Union to communicate all of the progress done by Ukraine, those tectonic changes that happened in Ukraine to support the national communities. Within the last year, we had about 42 consultations with politicians, with the experts in the area of human rights and the rights of minorities. We plan more conferences in Germany and Brussels next year. One of those conferences will be done in coordination with the Mejlis of Crimean Tatar people. I am IDP from Crimea myself, and this is an important thing for me. And I want to thank all of our partners in Germany, Red Cross, Caritas, everyone else who supports and fights for Ukraine. I also need to mention important area of support. The support of cultural sector is important to remember. House of Europe, Giuseppe, and other representatives who really help Ukraine not only support the cultural sector but also talk the language of culture in different platforms. It's important for us. It's very brief, but I hope that I've made it telling you just a little bit about us. I would like to ask our technical team to get Miss Elena Arabaji connected to us. Miss Elena, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's pleasure taking part in such an event. I want to thank the armed forces of Ukraine. I want to thank the representatives of all of the national communities. I've heard today about our unity. Our unity is very important to us. And I want to thank the Media Center for this opportunity to tell about our stories, our national ethnic minorities, national ethnic communities, because the hybrid war is going on, and in the media space we have to continue communicating about the representatives of the national communities who defend the country, those who unite for the sake of our common business. I'm a representative of Karaites. We are indigenous people of Ukraine, and Crimean Tatars. Karaites received this status according to the law dated 2021. We have the community of Karaites established in the city of Melitopol. We were preserving the culture, language, and the religion of our people. The first strike on our people was on in the year 2014 with the beginning of the war, and the full-scale invasion was yet another blow to the unity of Kyiv. We left the occupied cities. We were talking about the almanac today, the chronicles of those atrocities of Russia. I was a witness myself of the cases when the occupiers were detaining the Crimean Tatars. Elena Rizayeva, 130 days. There was a prayer in the square, central square of Melitopol, the prayer of Ukraine, and the aggressor could do nothing about that. The people were coming to the square and praying for Ukraine. Everybody, all the confessions except for Moscow Patriarchate. Many of our brothers and sisters who remained in Melitopol, they are taken prisoners by the occupiers, both the representatives of Karaites and Crimean Tatar, Bulgarian, Greek minorities, you name it. And thanks to the support of Karaites of Israel, of Poland, Lithuania, Karaites of different parts, we've got shelter in parts of the world. We got shelter in those parts of the world. And as my colleague, the representative of Greek nationality, said that the Greeks are on the brink of extinction now, I'm concerned by the fact that we as Karaites may end up on the brink of extinction too, because the families are broken, the family connections are broken. Our grandchildren don't study Karian language because a lot of our teachers are left in the temporarily occupied territories, but we continue taking all reasonable effort, even regardless of the amount of our communities. We take all reasonable efforts to support Ukraine. Our men are in the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine. We donate a lot to the armed forces of Ukraine. The first train that came to Kherson was from Melitopol community, headed by one of the Karims, and I would like to thank the Council of Europe, the multicultural Melitopol and Kyiv community are being accepted in the projects of European Council. They help us to communicate, to dream about the future, to put together the plans for the occupation. I would like to thank the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Thank you, Ms. Elena. So let's get back to our panelists. Mr. Ikar, we've heard a lot of stories of inspiration. We see that all of the national communities, they do everything they can and even cannot to support both the civilians and the armed forces of Ukraine. I think it's very specific for Ukraine when different nationalities can live together, move in the same direction, supporting each other. In your opinion, what does the work of the national communities does when everybody continues scaling this wall? Thank you very much. We are really different, but we are united, and this complicated situation related with the bloody war against Russia, it demonstrates that we are united. About 20% of population of Ukraine is represented by the national minorities. By numbers, there are about 130 such national minorities according to the latest census. So Ukraine is one of the most polyethnic countries in Europe. However, this situation demonstrates how united we are. All of the national communities of Ukraine demonstrated that they are full-fledged. They are Ukrainians, first of all. They are representatives, and they originate from different national communities, but they're all Ukrainians, and many of them proved themselves in the battlefield, in the armed forces of Ukraine, in the territorial defense forces, but they've also demonstrated themselves in other areas to repel Russian aggression, information front, humanitarian front, the work of our medics, all of the national minorities, they showed themselves positively, and our service in our work, we thrive during both internal events and when we represent the interests of Ukraine abroad. We try to emphasize it, we try to stress it, to make sure that the people all around the world know how united Ukraine is and how the national minorities work for the sake of Ukraine to defend it against the Russian aggressor. On our part, we continue working to protect the best interests of our national minorities. We continue working to create and reform the legislation of Ukraine within the last couple of months. We continue working about that. Working on that, we present that legislation abroad, the reformation of legislation in the area of national minorities is one of the recommendations of European Commission related to the candidate status of Ukraine to become a member of the European Union. We will fulfill our obligations related to our national minorities, and I hope that European institutions, they will appreciate our joint work, and Ukraine will shortly become a member of European Union. To wrap it up, I would like to thank all of the participants of today's event, everybody who joins us both online and offline. A lot of interesting information was heard today. We collect this information from the very first days of war. There's a lot of it. We've collected all of it, and I would like to make an announcement. We've made an almanac, the almanac of resistance, the resistance of the national minorities of Ukraine and all of the people of Ukraine, the resistance against Russian aggressor. This almanac will be presented in hard copy and online. Well, it basically already exists. Of course, we were not able to put all of the information in there because it keeps coming. There's a lot of it. But yes, such an almanac is already there, created by the State Service of Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Conscience. Again, thank you for invitation to take part in this event. Thank you, Mr. Igor, and we're about to wrap up our marathon called We Are Different, We Are Equal, We Are United. We would like to thank everybody who joined us both online and offline. Our team is putting together the schedule for tomorrow. Stay tuned. Thank you.